Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts. The victims were in airplanes or in their offices, secretaries, businessmen and women, military and federal workers.
It's always challenging for us to think about what episode we'd like to do, like a guest or something of that nature, because of the fact that 9/11 is such a historic and important event that we feel, at least, that we should recognize that. So we thought we would change it up and do a little episode here about where were we when the event happened, or what were we doing? And from that, so what came out of that and such, you know, in terms of our individual. So I'll go first and say, for me in particular, I was near the end of my military career. I just spent 20 years and I had already planned on getting out of the Army. And, you know, I was part of the Cold War era, and we weren't sure there was anything that was ever going to go on. We knew there might be something there, but figured it would probably happen in the Fulda Gap, you know, where I was at even earlier in my career. That was going to be the main point of entrance by Russia. And then, of course, those events happened. And for me, I had just separated from the Army. I was actually just completed, I think, my terminal leave. I started working for a company as a consultant, contractor kind of job. It was a corporate company, not a government contract. I actually turned down a government contract opportunity. I went to work for this company, and I'm sitting there in a training where I'm learning a system that they had acquired, and they wanted us all to go through this so we could understand what it was about. And so I'm sitting there, and the instructor's talking, and somebody walks in and says, a plane just hit one of the towers in New York. And at that moment, I was thinking a little, probably like many people, a little biplane, small plane. And then they started talking about it, said no, they believe it might be a larger aircraft. Immediately, we were going around the building and trying to find televisions and learning what happened. I had friends that were in the Pentagon, former leaders and everything at that time frame that were there. I had, you know, friends that I knew were still kind of in the space where I could reach out to them and find out what's going on, where they work, but I couldn't get a hold of anybody. For me at that time frame, my so what, or my action was, you know, I really thought about coming back on active duty because of it. I mean, you spend 20 years in the Army to go to combat, you know, to serve your country in case you're ever called. I was in E8 at the time and had just finished an MBA by working on my weekends and stuff and evenings. My last couple of years, I had a fairly good job. And for me, I wanted to come back, and I realized that my role and would probably be better served as not going back on active duty at that time frame. There weren't too many of us needed. It was more individuals that were actually going to be in the fight. I'd probably be managing a Connex in the rear. That's what a lot of my friends told me. It's like, no, you know, everybody has their time and you did yours. But, you know, for me, it was a difficult time. And for many years thereafter, and I can tell you it still weighs on me of, did I make the right decision in not going in? And that's kind of, for me, my thing was I wanted to do something to give back, and later on following that, and that's why I started this podcast. It was one of my ways of, all right, I can contribute in a different way. I can lend my experiences and stuff previously and what I did following separation, and it's what really a few years later started this whole podcast up.
Yeah. I mean, I'll let you go. I was just going to make a comment based off what you were saying is 9/11 brought out a lot of people who didn't know they had that in them, right? A lot of people that joined, you know, a lot of folks that had good paying jobs, right? And 6-figure jobs, and they go enlist, and now they're a PFC because they have a college degree, but 9/11 brought them out. It's just amazing, you know, something so tragic, they can bring an entire country together And then individually, you know, people just come out and they learn something about themselves. I just find that very, I think it's good for the country, knowing that, you know, we can bond together like that. And then for you, you know, 2 decades serving your country, possibly fighting the Mad Horde coming across the border, you know, you always have that in the back of your mind. And it was tense in Germany at times.
Yeah.
You know? And then to be out the door, I don't even know what that would feel like to go, man, you know, I've been in the NFL this whole time and all they ever let me do is play scrimmage games. Yeah. And, you know, now it's time to go play in the Super Bowl, right? I get
tough.
that.
And there was a lot of guys that did end up coming back on active duty and doing that. You know, for my family and for me, it just wasn't the right timing. And for what I was doing at the time frame, pretty much all my buddies, they were E8s or E9s and stuff. And it wasn't like they were carrying a rifle and going down range so much. And so, you know, and when you get up to higher tier, you know this from retiring as a sergeant major, your role in, you know, there's fewer of those. So they don't need as many of us. Yeah. What they needed was somebody who was willing to come in and pick up the weapon and carry the fight. And
just in case.
I really appreciate everybody who did that and heard the call and the country's call and decided to do that. But we each have different roles. And I try to explain that today, since we're talking about this, even to individuals that says, you know, I didn't serve, but, and be like, no, there is no but. Even as a civilian, you do things for veterans. You're supporting individuals. You're a caring person. There is no but.
No,
because shouldn't be no separation. I don't mean to take us down a different route.
No. I think it's wonderful that you say that because the support is there. Also, you volunteered. Yeah, I volunteered. Yep. The guy that just said but didn't. You know, we didn't go down together, and I made the decision. He didn't, or she didn't. You know, that's the notoriety I get is that I chose that profession. Yeah. Thanks for being an accountant, you know, or whatever. But I get it. And for you, and I've said this before because my father was kind of in the same boat with the Gulf War, is that you set the conditions for the people after you to be successful. If you were horrible at your job, if you were horrible as a leader, then future successes wouldn't have been present, right? But people were successful, and they were directly and indirectly because of you. You know, the successes, in my mind, and a lot of other people that we've spoken with. So you've set the conditions for us.
Absolutely. So I was a sophomore in high school. I was 15 years old. I was in weight training. So
this is 3 generations.
This is
how it broke down.
This is before the Army, after the Army, and I guess you were during. Yeah. So yeah, I was a teenager. It was Tuesday. I was going to go to football practice. Honestly, this is how blinded I was to everything. Football practice got canceled, and I was like, "What?" Coach Hughes never canceled football practice, and then the game canceled on Friday. So I knew it was something bigger than that. Obviously, in my little 15-year-old mind at the time, I can remember who was standing next to me when we watched the second plane hit. And it's a moment in my life that I will never forget. I can never just not remember the looks on people's faces, utter confusion, this feeling of safety that we had in that one morning was all taken away.
Yeah, oh, wow. I like the
you know what I mean? Like we were comfortable. We were Americans.
Yeah.
We were comfortable. And then we realized how wrong we were.
In that moment, don't make no mistake. You know, make no mistake. They won in that sense.
Yes.
Because once we didn't have that sense of security and we woke up,
America changed forever.
It's because we were asleep at the wheel. We thought everything was fine. We were running through the motions.
We were complacent. As a country, we were complacent.
Well, that's the true definition of terrorism, right? What you just explained is just taking away your comfort.
Yep.
Being able to do something and action.
Through fear.
Yep, through fear. That changes your daily way of living, your normal processes. So, yeah, man.
And I always saw it as like my experience that day, not as the reason I joined the military, but a definite feather in the cap of the myriad of reasons as to why I joined the military. Some of it was out of necessity, but, I could have made it work doing something else.
Yeah.
But it served a purpose of what I needed at the time. But there was also this thing, that happened back when I was a sophomore in high school that I still remember, that's still fresh in my mind, that I want to go do something, or go at least help do something about. And that was one of the reasons why, it sounds crazy, I was happier that I was deployed to Afghanistan and not Iraq.
Yeah. Yeah, Iraq was...
Because that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Once you read into it, you realize that, yes, they were harboring people, but the threat probably came from other places. Yeah. That's neither here nor there. Yeah. At the time, though, I was like, I'd rather go there.
Whole other topic.
Yeah. So
question for you at 15. I mean, at that point, what was the most traumatic thing that you'd ever seen with your two eyes by the age of 15?
That was probably top 3, 100%. Yeah, top 3. And that was through a TV.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's still traumatic.
When you can reach through a TV and traumatize somebody, or I always say that trauma is relative, but traumatic being that it's remembered vividly, and you can feel emotions from the time that it happened.
Yeah. It's a fear.
Yeah.
I mean, as a young man, I think growing up, and I think we can all relate to this, being in elementary school, I think the thing that we were most scared of was probably getting in a fight. Mm-hmm. I mean, and most kids talk about it. Yeah. Most young men talk about it. They're like, man, I got in a fight, got punched in the face. Nobody wants to get punched in the face, right? Yeah. I mean, you kind of grow into it, especially in the Army. But, at that point, that was like the scariest thing that could probably ever happen to you as a young man, is getting into a fight, right? That's a big leap.
Yeah.
Your fears, that aperture just opened way up.
I would way rather get punched in the face than have to jump off of the 57th story of the World Trade Center.
Yeah, that was traumatic. Watching people do that.
We watched it in real time
because people didn't know that was about to happen,
and everybody was like, "That's debris, and then someone said those are people.
Yeah,
and then it's just like the air goes out of the room even more. Even when you think the air couldn't come out of the room even more, it just...
Can you imagine being a teacher trying to collect all of that emotion and keep yourself together? I can't.
Our school shut it down. It was everyone on their desk. You're going to watch this TV. The bell's going to ring. You're going to go to the next class, and then you're going to watch the TV.
Yeah.
And that's all we did all day. That's all we did for the rest of the week, pretty much. And it was just I remember it's a somber time. But, I always put the but in here, that next week, you start seeing the red, the white, and the blue. And it was, I'm getting chills just talking about it, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, and once again, I'm 15. I'm in my little football player mind. I start seeing cheerleaders wearing American flag shirts. Everyone's wearing American flag shirts. And I want to say that my patriotism was pushed over the edge during that time.
I think everybody's was.
September 12th up until now. I mean,
I'm not old enough, and nor have I ever asked my parents, my mother who's still living, the feeling of, say, the end of World War II as an example.
Like the V-Day experience, yes.
And the parade and all of that. But, I mean, that was pretty amazing, even months and months after.
When George Bush threw out the opening pitch of the World Series, the first pitch of the World Series, and it was like, yeah, we're American. Yeah. Everybody was American. You could be brown, black, white, yellow.
Oh, it didn't matter.
Didn't matter.
Probably the next time was when we got them.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was the second time frame.
Yes.
So I'm curious, what about you?
Good Lord. So smack dab in the middle. I think the most traumatic thing I'd seen up to that point, this is kind of segue into my experience, was probably the Space Shuttle Challenger. I was in school when that happened. Yeah. And they showed that on television.
I was on recruiting duty, and the Air Force guy was watching it because he's Air Force, and us Army guys were over there trying to get some recruits in, and all of a sudden he's yelling, and we go running over, and I saw it in replay. I didn't see it when it actually happened.
Everyone was tuned in. I remember my siblings talking about it. Everyone was tuned in because they were teachers. It was the first time teachers were going to space.
Exactly.
So everybody was like, we got to watch this.
Was it Christy McCullough?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it just, obviously something bad happened.
Yeah. And then they were trying to figure out why I was drawing pictures of it. I was like, I don't know, maybe because you put it on TV and then you asked us to draw our experiences of it. I don't know. I got in trouble for that. Anyway, as I digress, no shit, there we were at Fort Hood doing Op 4. I was in 1-7 Cav, which at that point, 1-7 Div Cav, Gary Owen. If you've ever seen We Were Soldiers, based off the book We Were Soldiers, Once and Young, 1-7 Cav, Division Cavalry was the premier reconnaissance force that would spearhead an entire division that would move forward in front of the 3 maneuver brigades within 1st Cavalry Division. So that's the way that we were set up. Tanks, Bradleys, Kiowas, reconnaissance in depth, recon by fire, however you want to do it, we had it. But they would use us as opposition force for any of the training exercises for the brigades. So the maneuver brigades would go train, and we'd play Op 4, which I thought was absolutely amazing.
Yeah, you were in-house Geronimo for Fort Hood.
Oh, killing it. Yeah. Because we were good at what we did, and we were very cocky about it. Learned a lot about myself, learned a lot about people. That day, we were part of a forward security element. I had, it was my tank brothers were with us. So I was on a Bradley leading people in, and we were going up against a tank company that was dug in a defensive position on Antelope Mound. So we were coming off of a wood line. It's dusk, it's dawn, right? And the sun's starting to come up, and we're just waxing tanks. I mean, we're doing it big time to the point to where, we're talking a lot of smash. Once you kill everybody on the objective, you go up there and you're pivot steering one way and traversing the turret the other and just making everybody mad. So we get up to the top, and I don't remember what time it was, but we've been up all night. I mean, we've been attacking these tanks for a while, and they call all of our moving units. Like I said, I was part of the forward security element, so it was a smaller group, but they called the entire troop up, and all of the 1st Brigade tanks went away. Like, oh, they must be recocking, right? Because that was going to be, that we weren't done. We had more missions to go.
There was no index and stuff.
No, not yet. Yeah. No, I think we still had a couple of days. I might be wrong. It was a while ago. They call up all the Bradley and tank commanders to the top of Antelope Mound. And as we're getting up there, I'm downloading. I'm like, I wonder what happened. And my driver and my gunner, I think it was, we had Osborne was out there. Hernandez was out there. They had a radio, like a regular radio that was hanging up. Yeah, and he was listening to it, and he said something about a bomb at the World Trade Center. We're like, oh, okay. Not knowing that this is what this conversation was going to be about. So we go up, and I don't want to misspeak about who it was, but senior leader, I think it was, I think it might have been the commander, because we had Colonel Funk, General Funk, right? But Colonel Funk at the time was the squadron commander, I believe. They said, "Hey, plane has hit one of the towers. We don't know what's happening, but we're going to continue to train. We're going to recock, and then be prepared too, because I believe we were DRB, so I think we were like the global response force at the time." Still, you mirror up with 82nd. 82nd goes in first, then you bring in the armor. So we're like, oh, okay, well, we're going to recock and go do this. And man, that really sucks about the World Trade Center. We still didn't have the details because I'm on a Bradley. And I get back, and we're getting ready to roll out. And they tell us to stand by. Second one hit. And at that point, index. Yeah. So everything stops. I just remember my time there because it stood still. One of my torsion bars broke on the Bradleys, part of the suspension. So the tanks have independent suspension. Bradleys have torsion bars that go across the hull, and one of them snapped. So that means this arm that holds the road wheel is done for. So we have to chain this thing up to the side skirt to keep it going, right? And they were going to bring a recovery vehicle out to come get us. So an 88 was going to come and get us. So we're waiting. Meanwhile, the entire brigade and all of 1-7 Cav is headed to the wash rack because we're getting ready to go. I mean, we're talking like they've already talked wash rack operations, after mission, after ops stuff.
So you guys have already four cornered and everything, and you guys are bouncing.
Yeah, we're getting, and then the talk is that we got to go pack bags and start staging.
You guys didn't have like A bags and stuff already?
We did. So we had one set of bags ready to go.
Right.
And it was in our CP, which is down at the motor pool.
They just wanted you to go pack all your hand carry stuff.
All the other stuff, let's get it ready to go. But meanwhile, we're sitting on Antelope Mound. It's barren. It's just the four of us. So it's my driver, my gunner, me, and our dismount. And we're just sitting there. And literally everybody has left. And it's just us. And we're just watching everybody just take off. And all we have is this radio, this silence, and each other to discuss what's happening in the world. And, of course, I'm the senior guy out there on the track, young staff sergeant, like, hey, what's going to happen? Man, I don't know. We're going to figure it out, though, right? We're going to do this together. I was a young sergeant at the time. In fact, I wasn't even a staff sergeant yet. So, yeah, we didn't have time to register what was really happening because I didn't get to see it on TV. I didn't get to see it on TV until like 3 or 4 in the morning because by the time we were able, they told us finally to limp it back. So here we are with this thing chained up on the, don't ever do this. If anybody rides a Bradley now, don't ever do what we did. We chained this thing up to the side skirt and then we rolled and limped this thing to the wash rack. And we were at the back of the line. It's like gunnery, just sitting there waiting for your turn. Got everything washed, had to bring it back. Now we have to replace parts. We have to replace the torsion bar. People have got track pads. You're doing maintenance.
Horse saddle man.
Yeah. Because you got to get these vehicles ready to go. And then by the time we got everything done, you're home, you're taking a shower. And I think recall was, whatever. That was my experience with 9/11. The so what to that was we didn't end up getting called forward. It was 4th Infantry Division was still there at Fort Hood. And I believe it was 110 Cav, which was the experimental brigade at the time, got pushed into, they got pushed into Iraq. So that's how people get their history messed up. Like, oh, somebody hit the towers, Osama bin Laden. We're in Iraq. Oh, okay. So that's it. It's really weird.
Yeah. Now, for you, and it is interesting because I don't know that we really even talked about this prior about having the 3 different generations and what our experiences were.
Interesting.
Me just getting out, you're a couple of years away removed from even being able to be eligible.
Yep.
And then you're in at that exact moment.
Yeah, I'm a sergeant, yeah.
And you're on a force that's reactionary that could have very well been the one that would have went in there and been one of the first elements, at least, to be on ground.
Yeah. For a couple of days, it was really crazy. I don't remember. I'm trying to figure out if I'm mixing a bunch of information together, but I know Antelope Mound happened. I just remember that time sitting there with the fellas and just how everybody just disappeared, and we're sitting on this it's like sagebrush and you're on a mound and there's dirt and it's Texas, and you can see things in the distance, but it's just so quiet. You got nothing. The Bradley's not going, the radio's going, you're hearing people panic, and we're all just sitting there in our thoughts, just trying to figure out what the next move is going to be. And you don't know whether to be personally scared or if you just need to start ramping up in your mind that we're probably going to go someplace because something happened. It's just a weird place to be.
22 years removed from that. I think, you think about that. The generation that now is joining the military, weren't even born at that time frame, or 4 years removed from even being born in some cases or longer. Which is just kind of crazy, right? So you're listening to this and you're one of those individuals and you wonder why people still focus on that event. And, because it was an historic event in history that changed the landscape of a lot of things that went on. And you can talk about, whether or not it actually happened, whether or not after that we should have been there, were there weapons of mass destruction or not, that's not what this podcast episode is about. It's about a moment in time of our country in which we came together. There was a strong event of something that never happened on American soil, which told us that it is absolutely capable of happening here. Which prior to that, we thought we were, perfectly fine and nothing like that would ever happen. Yeah. So I think, for those reasons, we at least wanted to come together and talk about where we were, what happened to us, what we took away from those events and stuff, and what happened. Each of you probably have a story and, may have a different, things that you saw or whatever. It's much like if we all went into the same house and breached it and everything, we'd all have different stories as well. But I hope, if nothing else, you take the time to think about those who lost their lives on that day at the Pentagon, and the aircraft that had to hit the ground, and then as well as the one that two that hit the towers. There was a lot of lives that were lost that day, and there were countless lives that were lost thereafter because of those events and us getting engaged in a 20-year war. So we wanted to at least bring, for us, why we thought that day was important, and that was kind of the purpose of the episode.
Yeah,